As of late, there's been a lot of these fantastic looking games popping up on Roblox's front page. And while some of these quality games are genuinely great, others definitely look better than they play. So to determine whether or not the glazing for these so-called quality games is valid, I've set out to review them and rate them according to their overall strengths and flaws. So get your popcorn, get your Bloxy Cola, and let's see if these quality games on Roblox are actually good. Starting with... That's it. The IRS has taken enough from me. Enough! Developed by Project Quantum Quest, Unorthodox Accoutting is a third-person shooter taking huge inspiration from Ultrakill. In its current state, you do your best to evade taxes by gunning down the endless waves of tax collectors. Now, did I say this game took inspiration from Ultrakill? Let me just... And like how I mentioned in my previous video, Ultrakill works because it's 99% action, and because this action is done well. You're forced into an aggressive playstyle, but that's fine because the weapons and tools it provided make this playstyle fun. Can we say the same for? We can say the same for Unorthodox Accoutting, because listen, shooting myself into the air, then dropping this bomba and detonating it with my shotgun is already pretty cool. But then you're telling me I can shoot myself up, drop the double bomba, come in with this rocket launcher, bing bang boom! In a word, dopamine weapon interactions. Unorthodox Accoutting makes the 99% action work with your weapon synergies and the physics engine backing them. Did I mention this game is goofy? Because it gets pretty damn goofy. You're literally fighting off hordes of the local police force just to evade taxes. And look at how smug you are when you're doing this. I mean, thousands are dying in battle and you're just, and they ran me over. Man, I love the direction this game's going. Unorthodox Accoutting knows what kind of game it is, and it embraces it. The combat's satisfying and wonderfully unbalanced, the art direction's funny as hell, it's overall just a damn good game. So why is this segment not even close to being done? Alright, the biggest issue here is definitely the amount of playable content. When it comes down to it, you've basically only got 6 weapons to use in the Endless Horde mode. And as much fun as they are, it eventually will come down to you doing the same sets of combos against the same sets of enemies, which can get old pretty quickly. But that's just a development diff. If this were a full game with more weapons, movement options, and the story mode, Unorthodox Accoutting would be what Combat Initiation wished it was. Wait, I'm sorry for fun out of 3 Jiraiya's. Enough said. What are we, some kind of randomly generated droids? Developed by Just Enough Ideas, Randomly Generated Droids is a simple roguelike where you grip droids through a series of randomly generated levels and use their circuits for strengthening yourself at a recurring shop. Repeat this till you fight this boss at the end, and boom, you're done. Now, I know what you're thinking. Yeah, the game's simple, but that's not inherently a bad thing. You're given such a simple premise with such simple tools that you actually have to approach randomly generated droids with some complexity. Take the combat for example. Sure, the only way of defending yourself are the base sword fighting mechanics with some ranged utility, but your enemies don't got many tools to their advantage either. When it comes down to it, they're glorified walking hurt boxes. With one issue, because most of the time, these hurt boxes are faster than you. This means you gotta pilot your character with a good chunk of precision if you want to keep yourself intact, especially considering the cramped environment you're in. Wait a minute, this sounds kinda familiar. You can only do so much with your base Roblox hand and your own skill, so you've got to use all the tools available to your disposal. This means exploiting the shop, the occasional enemy drops, the quirks of each individual class, and the occasional JJK jumping. Now, what did you look at that? This customization capability, figuring out what works well and what doesn't. These are all base roguelike mechanics proven to work, and Randomly Generated Droids fulfills these mechanics and then some, despite its simple appearance and seemingly simple gameplay. And honestly, the visuals being this simple, the gameplay being this simple, both are great things. Picking up the combat is easy and welcoming to players of all skill levels, but there is a high enough skill ceiling for perfecting this combat to be interesting. For the visuals, I mean, this is Roblox. Not everyone here is going to have a crazy gaming PC, much less a workable laptop, and that's fine for randomly generated droids. Even with the lowest possible graphic settings, enemies and items are still recognizable enough to distinguish from one another. But that's it, enough glazing, because nothing's perfect and randomly generated droids ain't an exception to this rule. See, this game takes its simplicity and uses it to its own advantage, but this creates a whole nother set of problems. Here, check this out. This is Hades, a critically acclaimed roguelike that basically does everything perfect. But I don't want to focus on everything. I want to focus on these. There are a ton of different weapons here, and they all play differently enough to warrant a variety of different playstyles between them. Taking the main storyline and character upgrades aside, this is how Hades promotes its replayability. Now, let's take a look at randomly generated droids' weapons. Oh. Maybe it's classes? Yeah, when it comes down to it, randomly generated droids can get repetitive, especially if you're going solo bolo. The complexity of different scenarios you're provided can get pretty mundane pretty quickly once you figure out a way to get through them. That said, there is the Ascension system, which increases the difficulty of the game after each successful run. This implies finding new ways to get past these different scenarios, upping the complexity and thus the replayability. You know what? We can give randomly generated droids a pass here. If you find the game getting boring, play with some friends or get good, baby. Even with this flaw, randomly generated droids is the Roblox roguelike. If you enjoyed a game like ours, I highly recommend you try this one out. It's been here for 4 years, so here's to another 4. And of course, a beginner's guide to faking your death. Okay, listen, I promise it's not just a doors closed. Holy shit. Developed by the Urban Shade Halal division, Pressure is hard to define. It's not a horror game nor a total roguelike. You know what, let me just explain. In this game, you venture into a compromised underwater facility, trying to get as far as possible while collecting precious lost data and narrowly avoiding local entities. Now, I need to be clear that Pressure doesn't work because it's a horror game. It's not. It gives you more than enough information to lose your fear of these entities, especially when you die to them. No. Pressure works because of its... The game's threats aren't here to scare you, they're here to pressure you, to keep you on your toes, to keep that heart beating while you scramble to prevent losing all of your progress. Understand that the major fear of this game isn't the dying to these entities, it's the progress lost from that one mere mistake. An obvious example is Pandemonium, which tries to pry you open from the safety of your life. Yeah, you get the idea. It's just a static PNG, not exactly scary, but it's still got your heart beating because you don't want to lose the time it took to get this far. Another good example are these clever little areas here. See, a common thread you'll come across is the Angler. He'll speed through hallways and end your run if he comes into contact with you. That said, he's pretty easy to avoid because the local lights start flickering whenever he's nearby. Oh, which means you instead need to listen for a subtle screaming cue, which gives a much shorter window to hide than the flickering lights. And this screaming is subtle, so you'll need to stay on high alert for whenever you're in those areas, even if it's not a present threat. That general principle applies to basically all of the entities in Pressure. The mere idea of these entities taking away your progress is enough pressure to keep you on your toes, to keep you needlessly stressed, to keep you engaged and interested. But other horror games have tried this and failed. The threat of losing progress was more of an annoyance than anything. So what does Pressure do different? How does it succeed in being fun? Tell you what, let's go back to those files. Any of those little details catch your eye? Whatever, here. The sci-fi environment, the local surroundings being not totally in ruins, but enough to tell you something's wandering around. The currency you're picking up being literal DNA samples and classified files about the same entities trying to kill you. In 2 words, world building and atmosphere. Pressure doesn't need to tell you that something interesting's going on, or that there are big scary threats out there to get you if it just shows you, which it does pretty damn well. It's not scary per se, but it's interesting. And with everything else we've got, that's all we need. See, Pressure's a fun game because the mechanics and components it's made up of complement one another. The roguelike system and the pressure behind the gameplay already have a nice synergy, but the local world building with all the classified files and death information ties all of this together into an interesting game. With no obvious flaws, I've got to give it 1 Flight of the Crows out of Half and Among Us.